Hi everybody, welcome back to Short Stories Brick by Brick. This is session number 4. For the last 3 sessions, you have been building a short story. Character, setting, plot. What happens in your story? What's the tension? What's the obstacle? Today we'll work on point of view. Who is going to tell that story? What's the best way to tell it? So, as usual, you are going to need a piece of paper, pen, pencil, or if you have a keyboard handy, you can use that, or your phone. We're going to do a warm-up exercise to begin with. This is called the first line exercise, and it involves some dialogue. Now, just a quick word on using dialogue. Some of you might want to have characters speaking in your story. Consult a short story online, or if you have one at home, or a novel. You can pretty much open any novel or book of short stories or short story itself, and you will see quotation marks. Most fiction writers will use quotation marks when someone is speaking. Some don't. But you can see just the mechanics of using dialogue, where the comma goes, how the writer makes a new paragraph usually when a new character speaks, just for clarity. So if you get stuck, do that. There's quite a bit I could say about dialogue. It's an important part of fiction writing, but for our purposes here, I just want to mention one thing beyond mechanics. If your main character, for example, is speaking, you want to make her, him, them sound true to who they are and true to the moment that they're in. What's their vocabulary? What's their education level? What's the situation we're in? We speak slightly differently depending on the situation. So try to be, as best as you can, true to that person and true to the moment. Okay. So the following is called the first line exercise. What I'd like you to do is to choose one of the following first lines of dialogue. Your choices are, I'm leaving you. That makes you look crazy. Use the force, Luke. Weasel? What weasel? Is the seat taken? I want you to take 8 or so minutes and write the rest of the dialogue for that scene. Okay. Before you do that, choose any one of these. You start with that, and then what would another person say in response to that? For example, if I started with, is this seat taken? Is this scene going to take place on a bus, in a movie theater, a classroom? And what would the person say in response? So you might have a bit of dialogue, some back and forth, but at some point pretty early on, you need to put in a sentence or two about where they are, practicing using sensory details. What does it look like, or smell like, or sound like? You might even include a line that describes one or both of the characters, and then you can go back to some dialogue. But just kind of have fun with this, tinker with it, and write a quick scene. Now and then I'll have a cheeky student, if I use this in a classroom, they'll use more than one of these. That's fine if you want to do that. It's not the most organic way to do it, but that's cool. I even had one student once put all 5 of these in one scene. If you want to do that, see what happens. So go ahead and take about 7-8 minutes and pause the video and write this scene. Okay. Now, let's review right quick point of view. These terms a lot of you have come across before, but we're just going to keep things really simple and clear and then go from there. The 2 types of point of view that we're going to be working with, you're going to choose one of these for your story. First person, the narrator. To narrate means to tell. The narrator is the person who tells the story. Okay. The narrator is part of the story when you use first person point of view. Usually you're using I, right? I saw him step into the bowling alley. Third person, the narrator has more of an outside perspective on the story, using he, she, or them. She saw him step into the bowling alley. Okay. For your story, I would like you to choose just one of these 2 points of view. Sometimes in class, I'll have a kid raise their hand and say, okay, you've got first person and third person. What about second person? Second person is when you use the word you and you address the reader. For example, you might be interested in knowing what happens next. The reason I don't have it on here is it's difficult to sustain an entire short story or other piece of fiction with second person point of view, talking to the reader the whole time. Now and then, a writer will try that in a short story to varying degrees of success, but for our purposes here, just stick with one of these points of view. Okay, we're going to do one more exercise. Go ahead and draw a line under what you did with the first lines. And I'm going to give you a scene. The scene is a man gets off a bus, trips, looks up, and sees a woman smiling at him. Okay, that's what happens. That's the scene. What I want you to do is to write that scene from a single point of view. For example, you could do first person from the woman's perspective. I was sitting on the bench when the bus pulled up. I saw a guy. First person, right? Or you can be outside the scene. Use third person point of view. Just stick with one, and you can have anything you want happen in this scene. Just try to write clearly and in one point of view. Take about maybe 6 minutes, 6.3 minutes, and work on this and pause the video. Okay. So, I've got these two books sitting over here I showed you yesterday, and I'll just read you a sentence from each, and you can kind of follow the point of view. Kip walks out of the field where he has been digging, his left hand raised in front of him as if he has sprained it. Okay, third person from The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. Remains of the Day, another fine novel, Kazuo Ishiguro. Now, in these quiet moments as I wait for the world about to awake, I find myself going over in my mind again passages from Miss Kenton's letter. First person point of view. There's so many great novels written in either point of view. So basically you have to find out what feels most natural for you, for your story. Do you want your main character to tell that story, or does it feel just more comfortable for you for this story to be kind of outside the story about using third person? Okay, and just go with it. All right. Well, guess what? It's time to start writing a first draft. Before the next session, you're going to need a completed first draft. Okay? So, you've got a character you've thought about that's been living in some part of your mind. You have an idea of the setting, and you're going to bring that setting to life each time you change the scene with some sensory details, what things look like, smell like, sound like. You've given some thought to some sort of obstacle or problem that your main character has to deal with. What happens? So, now you set out into it. I want to offer just a few words before you do that. You can begin your story with some sort of drama, as happened in Thank You, Ma'am. Something's happening right off the bat. You could begin with a sentence or two with a vivid description of the setting. A character detail could start your story if you'd like. It's entirely up to you. And again, you can always change it later. Do not try to make your first draft perfect. Take the word perfect and just break it in half. Don't do this to your own shirt. Remember, whatever you do, you just want to pull that reader into the story. Okay? All right. What else? Deadlines can be helpful in writing a first draft. If you're one of those people, set a timer. See what happens. Do you have music on when you write, or do you need relative quiet? Maybe you have noise-canceling headphones or earplugs. I oftentimes, if it's noisy, like my neighbors are out doing something, I'll wear some foam earplugs just because I kind of like it sort of quiet. I want to tell you right quick before we go today about a great poet named William Stafford, who was the Oregon Poet Laureate for many years, and he taught up at Lewis and Clark College. He would sometimes walk into his classroom, poetry class, and tell his students when they were working on first drafts of their poems, work to your lowest possible standard. Kids would be looking at each other. Did he, what? Work to your lowest possible standard. And he's saying, of course, just get the words onto the page however you can. You can go back later and change anything you want, rearrange things, fine-tune things, polish things. But for that first draft, just get it onto the page. Okay. By the way, here's a Post-it note that sits near my desk. I don't know if you can see that. There are no perfect conditions. I think of this sentence. I look at this several times a day. There are no perfect conditions. Either you want to get it written or you don't. But you're here, so you want to get it written. All right. Again, finish that draft, and then I'll see you next time for our final session. Good luck.